Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grubner, with us as always to talk all things markets. University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
Happy Thanksgiving, a day late. I hope you had a wonderful day with your family as well.
Yeah, lots of good turkey. So now it's time to get back to work, right?
I'm always thankful for you.
Or Black Friday shopping.
No, I was told there's no shopping in this house. I was cut off already. All right. I will say I am always thankful for you every Friday to get to have these conversations, and there's plenty of fun stuff for us to get into this week.
Yeah, well, likewise. It's always good, Megan, to be able to do these with you.
All right. Let's get started and recap what happened this week in this holiday shortened week.
Yeah, on the cattle side this week, we saw cash fed cattle go higher this week, up $5.10. On the feeder cattle side, really not enough markets open this week, given it was Thanksgiving week to get a good test, although there seemed to be strong undertones in the feeder cattle markets, those that at least operated this week. On the future side, the December live cattle futures contract closed up nearly $4.60, and the January feeder cattle contract closed up a little more than $6 on the week. The choice box beef price was down nearly 40 cents this week. On the hog side, cash barrel and gilt prices were down 65 cents. And the December lean hog futures contract was down nearly 50 cents this week. The pork cutout value lost $4.10 on what was weaker loins, hams, and bellies this week.
Gosh, it's sure interesting to see some of those cattle prices in the last couple of weeks as they've continued to climb.
Yeah, Megan, we might be just getting started on what's some positive move in cattle prices as we look ahead here into 2022, and some smaller numbers, I think, has something to do with that.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up in a little bit. Let's recap and take a look at the slaughter numbers this week. Obviously, a reminder, a day out for the holiday, and kind of, in some cases, a little bit smaller numbers in some of those other days as well.
Yeah, if we start with cattle slaughter this week, USDA said for the week ending November 27th, 566,000 head of cattle to be slaughtered this week. That's down 111,000 from where we were a week ago. And of course, because of the one day out, that's the reason for the below year ago levels, below week ago levels. Relative to a year ago, actually cattle slaughter up 2,000 head. On the hog side, a run of 2.261 million head of hogs this week, down 368,000 from where we were a week ago, and 79,000 below where we were a year ago.
All right, two reports this week. Cold storage was the first one that came out early on. Let's talk about how those numbers look compared to a year ago.
Yeah, so we continue to see tightening in those stock numbers. If we start with the big picture here for a minute, so beef, pork, chicken, and turkey ending stocks for October came in at 1.977 billion pounds. That's 250 million pounds below where we were a year ago at this time. So things continue to tighten on the pork side, I should say. 440 million pounds of pork in freezers at the end of October. That was down 30 million pounds from where we were in September. That has a lot to do with what were tighter belly stocks, as well as ham stocks also tighter in October relative to September. On the beef side, so we had 477 million pounds of beef in freezers at the end of October. That's up 37 million pounds from where we were in September. So we're seasonally moving higher, yet when you look at beef ending stocks as well, they're about 20 million pounds below where we were October of a year ago. So everything looks fairly tight when we look at those freezer stocks at the end of October.
So you're saying if you haven't gotten your Christmas ham or your Christmas bacon, you should probably do it sooner rather than later?
So it sure looks like to me we're keeping those stocks awful tight, and of course, we certainly move a lot of product during the month. It just reminds us that, again, those two products still relatively tight out there, and maybe some higher prices ahead.
All right, let's get into livestock slaughter numbers from October. And when we talk and look at these cattle numbers, It's pretty interesting as those numbers, or at least those numbers have a pretty interesting story to tell.
Yeah, that's right. So a little bit of change here as we start to look at October of 21 relative to October of 2020. So total cattle slaughter down 3.3% in October of 21 relative to a year ago. However, when we look at year-to-date numbers, cattle slaughter is actually up 3.2% as you look through the first 10 months of 21 relative to 2020. So we're beginning to see, some slowdown in that slaughter, total cattle slaughter numbers, with one exception. When you look at beef cow slaughter, so the first 10 months of the year, 2.9 million head of beef cows that have been slaughtered year to date. That's 8.4% above where we were in 2020 at a little less than 2.7 million head of beef cow slaughter. So we're seeing nothing that would suggest to me that we're increasing the beef cow herd, and the drought that we've seen in the west and the northern plains continues to be at play, because even for October of this year, beef cow slaughter running 2.8% above where we were a year ago. On the pork side, hog slaughter for the month of October, 7.8% below where we were a year ago. And year to date on that front shows us about 2% below where we were in terms of year to date of 2020. Weights on both cattle and hogs are down. We've lost 10 pounds off of cattle dressed weights in October of this year relative to a year ago, and about 2 pounds off of hog weights as well.
I want to talk about that 8.4% number. As we take a look at that, my first guess would be that there's continued contraction on the cattle side of things. And this is something we've talked about a lot, that the 2022 outlook for cattle is something you can be pretty positive about. How do we take those numbers and digest it as we're looking ahead to the economics of 2022?
Yeah, for me, Megan, I mean, we just have ourselves set up, and I say set up, right? So both negative economic news for a lot of producers, I think, have led to some liquidation, but the drought in the west, the drought in the northern plains has got us in a situation where we're going to start talking about fewer cattle. Now, it's going to take a period of time. If you remember back to the last cattle on feed report, our on feed numbers are still running pretty much on pace with where we were a year ago. But I think as we get further down the road here, we'll start seeing lower cattle placements and much tighter cattle supplies as we get further into 2022. And I think that really changes the dynamics in terms of potentially giving cattle producers higher prices in 2022. Had we not had the drought, I'm not certain we'd be having this discussion, right now. And I would like to remind us, it's not just 2022. Those short supplies likely stay with us for a period of time as well. So there could be a good run ahead. Of course, it also takes demand hanging with us to get overly positive about cattle prices. But if demand stays with us and supplies get as tight as I think they can, we're going to be talking about much better cattle prices than we've seen for a number of years.
And I think it kind of opens the door to another conversation that we probably are going to have in person next week when we have a special taping of the weekly livestock market update, which is a note for folks who are watching. We won't be taping on Friday. We're going to tape on Saturday at the Missouri Livestock Symposium Saturday morning. But what does, and maybe I pose this to prep you for next week, what does that mean for these pieces of cattle legislation and cattle market legislation that we're continuing to have a conversation about? There's the compromise bill from Grassley Fisher that was released recently. And then earlier this week, I think a little bit of a curveball, some legislation from Cory Booker and Ro Khanna proposed that's supposed to have the text out this coming week. Does it make those conversations a little bit more difficult to have and maybe give those pieces of legislation a little bit more of a hurdle moving ahead?
So I think potentially it could. I was just looking. So box beef prices are about $36 above where they were a year ago. And when we look at cash cattle, about $28 above where they were a year ago. So I won't say margins have gotten back to where maybe cattle producers would like to see them. They're certainly moving in the right direction. And I think as those margins, packer margins, continue to narrow, that the interest in some of this legislation could wane a little bit. I'll just say Congress has a lot to get done between now and the end of the year, and finding time to work on this particular issue might also be difficult, just given everything that's on the plate.
And I would say that this is not the most important piece of legislation related to the livestock industry that needs to have movement before the end of the year.
Yeah, correct. So we got to finish, or sorry, I shouldn't say finish, but get LMR extended. It was extended in the short run CR. But what are we going to do with mandatory livestock reporting language as we look ahead? I think all of that certainly needs to be addressed. I will continue to say we do not want to lose mandatory livestock reporting. It's too important to the market information that you and I get out on a regular basis, and for producers across the country. So LMR matters a lot to us.
Especially when it comes to that whole price transparency conversation, right?
That's right. So, we talk an awful lot about, better price discovery, and sometimes I remind us that we need to report prices to have any indication of whether we think there's reasonable price discovery or not. And if we cash trade more cattle, but we don't have all of the same information available to us, one might wonder whether we're better off or worse off. So let's make sure mandatory livestock reporting continues.
All right, Scott, that'll do it for us this week. As we look ahead to next week, some of the areas we're going to touch on include.
Yeah, we'll get a restaurant performance index out next week, as well as a jobs report on the demand side. And USDA will also give us a look at overall U.S. farm income next week.
And just a reminder, we will not be on the air on Friday. We'll actually be on live Saturday morning for the Missouri Livestock Symposium. You can find more information about that if you're in the Missouri area in our weekly livestock market newsletter that comes out on Saturday morning. If you want to subscribe to that, if you want to submit questions or comments, you can go to brownfieldagnews.com and find your way there. Scott, great to see you. We will talk to you next week.
Sounds good, Megan.
I'm Megan Grabner for Brownfield.